liberty, and justice for all.
The roll call will show that all members are present. I'll look for whether or not we should adopt the consent agenda. There's only the one item on it of resignations. We will pass on the consent agenda. Then that will go into our closed meeting. The unfinished business is the second hearing for the review of the various policies that have been suggested for amendment. Do you want to report on
Sure,
that?
I can,
Get a motion?
yep, I've got, but first of all, welcome everyone to Readfield Elementary. It's been some time since the board has been down for a formal meeting. Tonight we are in the art music room, okay? And when we get to the agenda item, we'll take a tour of Readfield. Thank you, Mrs. Grable, for allowing us to come in a little after hours and take in tonight. On to the unfinished business with, as Mr. Martinson said, the policies from the 600 in the financials. There are no changes to the policies that are in front of you this evening. Everyone that you are looking at, we discussed, we had comments on. There's been no changes since the last time we have met. If there's one in particular a board member would like to pull out, we certainly can. Mr. Martinson did ask that purchasing 672 be placed back in for a potential discussion, if appropriate. Our discussion there was based on a number if we were looking at purchasing thresholds there. Are there any questions?
Yeah, the reason I held up, we did have a short discussion at the last meeting about whether there should be a threshold for when contracts come to the board. There is not a set threshold. Joe brings, and Scott bring contracts of various types to us, and generally the larger ones come, but there is not a set policy on it. It's at the discretion of basically Scott or Joe on whether it should come to us. And it's also possible at any time for us to say, we want to place this such a contract on the agenda to have the board review it. So my question to you is, would you like to modify that?
We also go to rule of thumb, right? Like as a general rule, how, and Joe had an answer at the time that I thought was reasonable, but can you refresh us?
Yes, so anything that we bring to the facilities committee that is looking at approving sites, updates, or equipment, property updates in and around the buildings, almost all of those things are always brought to the board, whether it was a report in the director report, or if it's an actionable item where we're making a recommendation for the board. If there's a item especially related to facility updates, usually anything over $10,000 relating to the board, but I wouldn't say that that is an absolute. We try to communicate with you as the board whenever we can. If there's something that we're not bringing to you, just let us know. You know, the board has a lot of approvals throughout the year, you think, from the committee structures with approving things at facilities, total compensation, your instructional committee, also, there's one other committee I'm forgetting right now, connections. We're bringing all those things to the board for potential approval and action, especially sometimes at those meetings. And then if there are things that happen on an emergency basis or we purposely budget for, we're also telling you when you're approving those annual budgets. But if you have a number that you want us to do, you can do that, or just let us know if you want to keep doing what we're doing.
I think what you're trying to avoid, right, was when like Josh at the bus garage was like, oh shoot, I got a flat tire. Well, don't be calling around, like go handle it. Like that needs to happen and it's not gigantic, right? Like we don't want to micromanage that.
And there hasn't been any problems. Everything's been working very well. Just when we were talking about that particular policy, there's been instances in other districts around us where the kind of understanding that we have, didn't work so well in other districts. Is there a dollar amount that wouldn't interfere with our normal flow of operations? Because that's what we wanna avoid.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, what I would say is when we kind of use that 10,000 mark, that was something we started a number of years ago when the committee started. I would say all of 10,000 in today's world is kind of lower. I would say a higher amount would put us in a position to continue to keep doing what we're doing, but we understand that the board would want to have action on those bigger items, so I don't want to tell you what number to put in, but I would say 10 would be too low from where we generally speak with things that we approve and update. If you want to pick a number higher than that, that would be helpful for us to keep with the normal flow of operations, but we know that when we think of the electrical update at the high school a few years ago, we lost that breaker, we just did, because
Right.
we knew we had to, and
Which, we brought that example up,
Right.
was like,
Yeah.
we needed
Right.
that.
Just communicate out following
Yeah.
across the board.
I personally don't think that there is a reason to put a dollar amount on it just because we don't have an issue. Not saying that we never will, but we have so many committees and they come to us with everything. To strap them to a dollar limit, I think is just not warranted here.
I was gonna say
If
the
there's
same
an
thing.
issue down the road, absolutely bring it back up and we can,
Well, the reason we're talking about it's not us. When we're looking at policy, these things aren't something that we're worried about or that we're concerned about. It's, you're tackling something to prevent something from
Right,
happening
because we only.
Right.
5 or 10 years down the road, because some of these hadn't been talked about in
15 years.
15 years. And
Then we might really wanna think about like what dollar amount we're gonna put on it and for what instances.
Right.
And then
And-
it's gotta be more than just a dollar amount.
Right.
We
I-
really
I
have to
would
go
like-
into the weeds
I
with
would like
this.
to see just that policy revisited with more depth to it.
One of the things that I thought about was anytime we're entering into a long-term service contract with somebody, you know, like a cleaning, rentals of anything, you know, or a lease, it could, most of those contracts nowadays are like 5 years long. And I think when you're getting into a contract that's gonna be looking at, you know, an annual outlay of, say, in excess of $120,000 or $150,000 a year, that's the type of thing I think that,
But those are always covered. Just, they're always discussed. We never enter into anything like that. I guess
no, I wouldn't say that, I can think of a couple of them
that we
that,
do.
like, since I've been on the board, we haven't talked about it,
Really?
yeah.
But I remember you brought like the van we brought at North Park Motors and it was only like, what, $7,000 or something, but, you
a
know.
little over 20, that would be.
Yeah.
We could take it back to policy, and we'll keep doing what we're doing to
That's
I
fine.
don't have.
bring everything forward. I agree with Mark, but the cleaning service one always comes.
Right, it does,
When
yep.
it's up, food service comes when it's up. Most of the contracted services we're bringing, leases, we usually have to because there's a
Yeah, I can't-
statutory component of
I
it.
can't think of anyone in that size that we don't
If
discuss
it's a
on it.
borrowing lease, we don't necessarily, if you're thinking of copier leases,
Right.
we don't necessarily
rental.
bring those because we're doing that behind the scenes from a bidding standpoint where we send them out to get the lowest price and the fit for what we're trying to do in our facilities. And if we've given an update to the board, it was either via a report when we make the change via the director report or let them know. Usually, I mean, we don't just go to the first person. We keep cost in mind when we do work too, but we can develop that if any duration of the lease that's longer than a few years or a dollar amount over X, we can bring those to the policy.
Well, I'm in agreement with what Mandy said, but with the forward thinking part of policy committee only going through it every
well,
4
and if
years.
it's every 4 years now, right?
Yep.
So if you guys do take this back to policy and set a number, keep in mind of what prices are gonna be in 4 years. Cause the last thing I wanna do is sit here and handcuff the schools
Right.
and then
No, I agree.
constantly get
I
approval
agree,
from
we don't have
us.
an issue, I think it was more like, we don't hardly go through these things.
Yeah,
Are you protecting the future?
If something becomes an issue where it needs to come up for discussion, it can be asked at any time and we can act on it
Yeah.
or make an adjustment.
So it sounds like the consensus would be, unless I misunderstand correctly, it's from, send this back to policy for now to think about it more thoroughly.
I don't have a problem with
But
it.
not the entire package, just this one piece.
Just the
one.
Just this one piece.
Yep. Okay, I am open to a motion to accept all the changes that are listed.
I'll make that motion.
Moved by Mandy,
I'll second.
seconded by
Charlie. I got Holly.
Holly.
Yeah.
And all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. That motion carries. Okay, new business, the first item on that is Rural Virtual Academy Program update. And Scott, can you take it away and introduce our guest?
On our agenda tonight, under Rural RVA, or Rural Virtual Academy, Mr. Brett Pickett's is with us this evening. Brett is one of our educational instructors at the intermediate middle school in the alternative education pathway. Brett is second year, all right, with us.
Correct.
Brought some real strong experiences into our ISMS in this area of alternative ed and working with kids and bringing around the best results. As our board knows, we are vested members of Rural Virtual Academy, and this past year, I was working with Brett and asked him to be, because he was using the program, not just in the ISMS, but supporting district-wide initiatives, to get even a little deeper dive in with RVA. And Brett is actually a representative on the RVA board, which is a conglomerate of schools, mainly in the northern half of the state. He represents our district, and I thought before we bring forward the potential contract for renewal at our December meeting, Brett would give us some highlights so that we can understand our actions and where we've been over the past year. I'm going to slide back here, so
Sounds
take
good.
it away, and I'll advance when ready.
All right, so thanks for having me tonight. I'm Brett Pickerts. I do stuff with RVA with K-8. Jacqueline Schomer does a little bit with our stuff at the high school. I do stuff with Gifted and Talented, with our at-risk program at the middle school, and RVA. So very happy that I'm on the governance board so I can advocate for the school district of New London. And RVA is so much more than what just happens online. Those students are very valuable to our district. I'll talk about the numbers with that. But it's really important to understand the engagement and connected piece that our in-person students are getting from RVA. So we'll just go ahead and get started, all right? So I used to teach U.S. history at the 8th grade level, so I thought I'd break it down into branches here. So the first piece of what people think about with online education is full-time online students. So those students are School District of New London school, or students I should say. And I manage the K-8 part of it. We're trying to get some testing with that. And then Mrs. Schomer works with our 9th through 12th graders. She's part of the Next Gen Academy and does some alt ed services with that. If students ever need to come in because they're not doing well in a class, or their parents want them to be observed for potential disabilities or engagement pieces at home that they're noticing, our learning center is actually housed in my classroom at the middle school. And we actually had 2 students come in last year to get caught up to some things, get some support academically with that. We've had some students get put on academic probation. The Schomer and I worked as a team to help get those students more involved, and they're off academic probation. And the high school at the RVA is super engaged and on that because there's such a great waiting list for that. So that's the full-time online piece. We have 24 kids currently in our district. Kind of talk about those numbers on the next slide. But the big piece that I want to talk about today is our District Connect. So it's our online courses, our one-off classes that we use for alternative ed purposes, our supplementary curriculum that I use for enrichment time, our advanced learners, District Connect events, which I have some pictures in your guys' board packets, as well in the slides, and some things we have not taken advantage of quite yet, just because it's kind of new to RVA, which is professional development opportunities that they provide at low cost or no cost to some districts. So as Mr. Black said, we are an invested partner as of 24-25. We get money back. It's cheaper for our full-time online students for the district to use it, and we get more services and priority in some of these events. So by the numbers, we have 24 kids full-time enrolled in RVA this year. That's K-12. It's more so on the middle school and the high school. We do have a few elementary students, but it may be up to 25. We have a student that's currently in the process of finishing enrollment. Just had some struggles in school at the middle school and is moving and switching to RVA. If you look at comparison, that was 21, and I did pull numbers from when I was not here, and that number was 15. So it's rapidly growing. RVA in general is rapidly growing. We had to turn away some big school districts at our last meeting. Unified School District up to Pier, Menominee Falls, they all went into RVA, and we got in at a really good time. So our numbers are kind of increasing with our full-time enrollment. You can go to the next slide. And some of the pieces I'll kind of focus my presentation on now. So that District Connect piece, our in-person piece, we had 113 students connected with our partnership with RVA in 2023. We had 0 in 2022. So we had an increase of 113 students. And that 88 number for this year is just what we've had so far. So I'm anticipating about 170 students being connected for events, one-off classes, supplementary curriculum through RVA. So that's a pretty big number compared to where we were 3 years ago. Go to the next slide. So the first thing I want to talk about, these are District Connect events. So the first one they always run at the beginning of the year that our middle school student council utilizes. It's called the Youth Leadership Summit. And there's actually 150 kids this year at the UW-Stevens Point Leadership Unit. So we had 21 students from New London. Some of the highlights from that, they learn leadership qualities, participate in a simulation, and bring ideas back to positively impact our buildings in the district. And we actually had a group win this year. We had 2 students win their ideas. They had to present in front of everyone, and they came up with an idea of like incentivizing our guest teachers in our buildings with like fundraising for gift cards. Now, if they follow through on that, that's kind of up to them. But they also understand as like 13-year-olds that sub-pay can sometimes be tricky to navigate. And so they came up with that idea and had like a pretty unanimous vote up at Stevens Point. In 2023, it was at the Mosinee Learning Center for RVA. Kind of the same thing, and they actually brought back some norms and some expectations of how their meetings will run to be more productive in student council. So great leadership opportunities. They are available for the high school. And that's one of the areas I still would like to grow a little bit with the high school and elementary for RVA. So our next event that we take students to, go ahead, Mr. Black, is the Kids in Action. So they learn about local government and the branches of government. Last year was at the Madison, and as Mr. Black alluded to, typically districts are around this part of the state, but there are some districts that participate in the RVA south of Madison. So last year's event was at the Capitol. It was in a pretty cool room where they got to vote on different laws for the school that they were at. And then that event concluded with a Q&A from an actual legislator from the state of Wisconsin. So the kids got to ask questions. He was very honest. It was very awesome. And we actually just went to the Brown County Courthouse 2 weeks ago, so kind of right in our backyard with Green Bay. We brought 28 kids this year. They had a student senate this year in House of Reps, so students got to vote on different laws. It was a little more dynamic this year. And then if you've never been to the Brown County Courthouse, it's a pretty cool building, so they got to do a scavenger hunt with that while learning about local government. And then before we go on to Brain Builders, these events are free for us. All we have to pay is for the busing. So these are really, really cool experiences. And my personal favorite is the next one, which is our Brain Builders, which is focusing on STEM careers. So last year, Teresa Reynoso and I brought 24 students from 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, kind of focusing on our career planning. These students got to work with real engineers, one-on-one or in small groups, and they were tasked at building a solar RC car. And they got to compete, as you can see in that middle picture. We had a couple students win some awards. And they got to see, honestly, I'd never been to North Central Technical College. It's a beautiful campus. And we had some kids inspired to potentially go there. I know it's kind of the drive up in Wausau, but it was a good experience in that sense as well. In 2024, we're going to the planetarium in Menasha. It's not just, we're going to turn the lights off and look at stars. It's hands-on STEM learning with this company they partner with called Engineering Today. So really awesome STEM opportunities for our students, again, that we just pay for busing and not for the events. And then the event that's not up there because we did not go last year, we are taking students to Tomahawk to Tree Haven for an environmental education day in May. So it's a little bit further of a drive, and we're very excited for that. So awesome District Connect events through RVA. that are very low cost for the district. So I'll briefly talk about one-off classes and supplemental curriculum. So our one-off classes are live instructional classes via Zoom. Now I know that might be concerning. These are super dynamic classes. It's not the, you can turn your camera off and not pay attention for half an hour. It's like you gotta engage with it. I've had a student, they're like, hey, can you click on this so I know you're paying attention? Like they're very engaged with these students. And so those are 30-minute classes. We primarily use them for math classes, for our EBD students, alt ed students at the high school and middle school. And if they don't get it, because math's a hard subject for everyone, most of the time, they have tutor rooms and tutoring and small group instruction, which they can have some flexibility with. So this allows for flexibility for alt ed student needs, mental health needs, and students returning back from alternative placements, or maybe need to catch up in the district. As part of being the governance, part of the governance board and RVA, I am able to help make better decisions, and we just opened up more seats for students at the high school. I know one of the challenges for our high school staff is getting seats and spots for these online classes, and that problem should be better for next school year because they're hiring teachers just to help districts like ours. And then the last thing I'll talk about today, with all the good benefits, is the supplementary curriculum, and that kind of rolls into my gifted and talented part of my job. Last year we used Kaleidoscope Kids. The year previous it was on a Zoom call. I just taught it last year to save money for the district. We got more kids in it. That allowed us to be flexible with our planning and programming. And we had 23 students last year. This year we have 13. In 2024 we limited to the 5th grade, and I'm running a project-based learning club for 6th grade. So that's why that number is a little bit lower. But the highlight of that, they got to create a podcast. They came up with ideas. They created a budget. A lot of them that were like weird food reviews, but it was fun for the kids to practice some of their speaking skills and some of that technology pieces as part of that. So they were really excited about that. I couldn't figure out technology-wise, unfortunately, how to put some of those podcasts in, but they were really excited to do that. That was a huge highlight. And then this year, our 8th graders are actually participating in middle school journalism online. I am the teacher leader for that course. It's asynchronous, but we're meeting once a week to kind of go through things, and the outcome from that class, what we're looking for is a school newspaper so we can keep our students updated, our families updated, and working with Mrs. Pinch to inspire some of those students. We have 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade readers in 8th grade right now. And so those are the many, just the small, just small pieces of RVA that I'm super passionate about because it engages students in the building, more so sometimes than the online students. Those online students are super important to our district, but we want to figure out how we can use all the great things RVA has for our in-person students, and we're doing that and hoping to expand
Can I
that.
ask a quick question?
Yeah, go for it.
So the one you just said about your students doing the newsletter,
Yeah,
are those kids only in RVA that are like, they're just like really high at reading and the rest of the day they're
yeah. So it's actually
Class?
yeah. Within our ELA curriculum, we have 30 minutes of called equitable conferencing time. So I meet in person to do direct instruction with 5th and 7th graders during that time. But for 8th grade, because we want to give them more to do and explore, and it's really hard to like differentiate between 9th and 12th grade readers, they get that time to work on the course during that half an hour, and then I can conference and meet with them and give
but the
them
rest
feedback.
of the day
Yep.
they're in person?
Yeah,
Okay.
yep, absolutely. So this course is not actually graded, it's just something that the students willingly signed up for. They wanted more, and they wanted to do this. So it's not in the grade book, it's just more so getting some of those skills, and these 12 kids are really awesome kids doing that. So are there any other questions? I know I gave you guys a ton of information. Thank you so much. We're looking forward to having RVA as part of our district in the future, hopefully, and the connections it helps build with students. So
I
thank you
just
for
have-
the time. Oh, yeah,
I
sorry.
just have a quick question.
Yeah.
Maybe you said this and I missed it.
Yeah.
Do you have a counterpart in the high school as well?
Yep, so Jacqueline Schomer is our next gen academy teacher. She teaches alt ed. And she has some kids in algebra right now that are using RVA for this. One of the challenges is finding times for that within the high school schedule. But we're hoping with more staff they are hiring at RVA because they're expanding so much right now that some of those problems will be alleviated.
And you said we have a few elementary students.
Yep.
Are you in charge of
Yes,
that?
yes. So about every 2 weeks or so, I call these families and check in with them. One of the goals that I have for myself personally, professionally, is to get some more of that testing involvement. Our RVA students are really good test takers, they helped some of our scores in the middle school. We had 2 students test last year. Some of those families don't want to test, but we want to try to get them in our buildings, so. Are there any other questions?
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for your time, I appreciate it, thank you very much.
As you can see, Mr. Pickeridge is very passionate about his role in taking on RVA and the opportunities that come forward just a few years ago, which didn't exist. We talk about that online presence and being effective, meeting targets and standards, and most certainly being accountable with, on results. RVA has been a program that's allowed us to do that, and also meet families in a place where if this wasn't an opportunity, the 24 or 5 families that chose us exclusively, they would be somewhere else in that part of our district. So that's been a nice caveat to support us.
Okay, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the district accountability report card review. Mr. Black.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Chris. This evening, we've got Tim Kuchar with us from CISA 6, board member. This is the first time we've been able to actually see Mr. Kuchar. Tim is part of their educational development program within CISA, and as you know, he's been supporting us as a district with our reconfiguration of teaching and learning this past year. I asked him if he would come in and share some feedback on this year's district report card as an interpretive. I know annually we go through this process and we talk about the strengths and the opportunities and create our SWOT analysis of where we are, where we've been, and what those opportunities going forward. So I'm anxious, as I'm sure you are, to hear a perspective on an outside lens looking in. I only know Tim's past experience. He was a C&I person with the Neenah School District and brought some expertise specifically to the high school within that. I don't want to steal your thunder, Tim, but the floor is yours.
It's good, it's good. My name is Tim Kacher. I wish I was Kuchar, I'd be related to golfer. I would be somewhere much warmer than where we are today, I'm sure. Yes, I'm Tim Kacher. I currently serve as the Director of Growth and Development for CISA 6. I've been in that role since July. Prior to being in that role, I served as the Curriculum Director for Neenah for 3 years, Associate Principal in that district for 7 years, and then several years I'm losing track of the teaching experience that comes along with that over time as well. I've had an opportunity, obviously, in my previous role to dive deep into the report card. That's not my goal tonight with you. It's not a let's get down into the granular. I'm much more concerned with just making sure that as you take a look at this report card, you have an understanding of the overview, what's going into it, what can you take out of it, and then possibly we start to see what is the work that's actually already being done as a result of this lagging indicator coming into your district in October when you know you have your hardworking administrators trying to do this work in July as they plan for this school year. And so they're already into their plans and they're being responsive, and we'll talk about the role that continuous development or continuous improvement needs to play in that as well. So first, before we get into things, I think it's extremely important to reground ourselves in your district vision. And the reason I say that is because I know that you've gone through that process with Scott. I believe Ted Knightsky had come in and done a lot of work with you guys to establish this. And if we don't ground ourselves in this before we take a look at a report card, we're doing ourselves a disservice. And I say that because you have established this as a team and said, this vision is what is important to us and what is important for our kids. And the things that really stood out to me when I looked at this piece was making sure that we develop our students by providing high quality instruction, personalized learning options, and a caring environment for your students. I don't think there's 3 more admirable things that this board and that this group of administrators could possibly attempt to support than those pieces there. And then obviously you have some intended outcomes where you want your kids to be effective communicators, problem solvers, critical thinkers, self-directed and lifelong learners, and finally again responsible contributing citizens. The work that happens in your schools isn't represented in this report card, and I think that's important for us to know. That report card is one data point. It's important for us to look at it, but I hope that we also get the opportunity as this board to step back and take a look at what is the work that's happening every single day, That's not just measured by your ACT, that's not just measured by your pre-ACT, your forward scores, etc. So certainly the report card we're gonna talk through and we're gonna see, yeah, there's a lot of these pieces that can be supported by it, but I hope that also you get the opportunity to just process through what else has to be taking place in this continuous school improvement process. Next up, I just have for us again, just taking a look through your district website. What are our guiding principles? So again, this is important work for you as a board to make sure that you're re-grounded in. I don't know how often you get an opportunity to take a look at this, but I wanted to make sure that this was just a focal point for you. Because again, you're talking about providing safe and secure environments for your kids, establishing and maintaining school, family, community partnerships, fostering students' developments of their assets, ensuring their students master the essential curriculum, recruit, develop, retain highly effective and quality staff, model what's expected, value diversity, meet the needs of our future. As I look at those bullet points, again, I take that as an outsider and I see there's not a lot of stuff in this report card that's going to be as highly represented as what you see here, because you are talking about safe and secure schools. You are talking about nurturing environments for your students. So again, we don't want to give more life to a measure than maybe what it has. And when I say that is, data shouldn't have a heartbeat, right? Data is just a piece of something I can look at that helps me or helps your team be reactive and be flexible in their thinking about what do they do next in order to support the kids that are in front of their face and in their hallways. Next up. So the other piece that I just wanted to make sure we point out is, one, knowing all of the different stakeholders that you guys have in your Success for All Students framework. The thing I really love about what you've done here is the fact that this fits so nicely into the rapid cycles of improvement process, which you have to plan. Last year, at some point, you guys got a chance to sit down, you developed your KPIs. You have to do, what is all the work that goes into that piece? Once that work is done, we get the chance to start to study. Again, the report card is one of those opportunities for you to study and for you to take away, what did we put in, what did we get out? Because now if we look at what we put in, what did we get out, we can make some of those decisions about what worked, what can be improved, and where can we grow. And that's the work that I know, and I just can't say enough about your administrative team for the feedback and the things. I just asked, hey, as a result of some of your work around your report card, what have you already started to do? And we'll take a look at that at the end of this, and I know I can't even give it justice because I know there's so much more than just the couple bullet points that we provide to you. But I hope that we see that and we recognize that yes, this is being taken very carefully by your leadership team, this is being utilized already, and this is going to be something that's a part of their improvement plans moving forward. So today we're really in that act phase of being able to say, okay, we got this stuff, we looked at it, we now have an idea of where do we go from here, and that's probably the most important part of our process as we move forward. So the first thing that I want to make sure that you have an understanding of when you look at your hard copy of your report card is, we start off with really, who are we? And the thing that's probably the most important, and I apologize, I'm too much of a teacher, so I will walk the board. The thing that really should stand out to you is your economically disadvantaged number. And the reason I say that this number is really important for you, because this is one of the indicators that's going to shape your report card more than anything else. And the reason that is as soon as that number goes over 35%, you now see your levels of achievement and your levels of growth. You're going to see movement in how much each of those categories is weighted. So by you being over 35%, you're going to see that your growth of your students is going to weigh more than the achievement of your students. If that number were under 35%, now you would start to see achievement weighted higher than your growth. So when we talk about growth, it's really important for us when we get there to understand that the state is doing a very deliberative process of saying, we're not just going to measure the growth of the kids in your school, we're going to take the kids in your schools and we're going to match them up against every kid in the state. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. The other pieces you can see here is just obviously the demographic breakdown. This, from what I've seen, this seems to be pretty consistent over time, so it's not like there's been dramatic curveballs that have been thrown your way with different student groups that have come in. But overall, this has remained fairly consistent over time. Scott, you can go ahead. So the next thing, as we talk about where we are, is really now those 4 big indicators that make up our report card piece. So first and foremost, you know that your summary scores here, that's at 62.8, that comes in at that meet expectations category. So how do we get that 62.8? We're taking the pieces of the pie here, so in this case, achievement, 21.1% of this score is based off of this achievement number. So they're taking 66.9, they're multiplying by 21.1%. That small chunk is the number that resides here. 28.9% is going to be multiplied by your 55.6. That's going to make up that small chunk. And the same process will happen with those other 4 categories in order to get to 62.8. So that's how they're trying to come up with that number over time in order to be consistent. So you understand how all of these different factors are coming to be. Now the other thing I think that's important for you guys as a board to recognize is when we talk about achievement, we see the dark blue line, we see the light gray line. Your dark blue line is where you are currently. That's 64% of your students, which in the old language would be proficient or advanced. In the new language, it's going to escape me off the top of my head. I just had it written down. It's, what's that? Advanced in meeting.
Proficient.
I like that. I'm sorry. Approaching. It's going to be on my notebook right here. Advanced in meeting. Thank you. So, you've got 64% of your kids that are advanced or meeting currently in English language arts. The state has 58.3%. So again, this is your K through 12 lens. This is not broken down by your schools. This is all of your kids. 69.7% of your kids are advanced or meeting in math, with 57.6 being the state mark. So again, that's a celebration for us. As we take a step back, anytime that we're going to be ahead of where our state is, that's something that we should celebrate. Is it a place where we're comfortable and a place that we're satisfied? That's up to this team to decide. There's always room for growth. There's always opportunities to continue to get better. But this is a great starting point. The reason I say this is a starting point is because this year, believe it or not, the state decided they would change something, which they never do, right? But they changed what their cut scores are for your forward test and for your pre-ACT, ACT. So when they're talking about these levels of advanced, I'm sorry, I was on my other side. When they talk about advanced in meeting, they've established cut scores that technically are lower to be more commensurate with what our peers throughout the Midwest and throughout the country have as cut scores. Prior to this, our cut scores were much higher than what we would see in other states. What their motivation is, I'm not going to pretend to understand.
Will they lower the bar?
That's what they,
When you say the
Yes.
state, do you mean DPI?
yes. Yep. And again, that's a decision that they have made. That's beyond our control. We continue to have kids show up. We continue to be great for kids. We continue to help them. That's what we have to do. Growth is an area now where we start to talk about how does the state establish what our growth is. In this case, they're going to take a variety of factors into account for every kid in your district. So let's just say you have a kid who's at that advanced level. They're going to take that kid and put them into a pool of kids throughout the state who fit within similar background criteria, such as race, such as economic status, etc. And they're going to establish what's the expected growth we have for that particular student across the state. So now they're saying, okay, we've got all these kids in this bucket, we expect for them to grow this much. We have all these kids in this bucket, we expect for them to grow this much. So when we see that 66% as our expected growth, that's what the state is saying to us as leaders. We expect that every student is going to grow that amount by the end of this school year, or by the end of last school, which would have been last school year. I apologize. So we can see, are we in a position right now that we would say our kids are growing at the same rate as what other students that are like them in the state? The answer is no. That's an opportunity for growth, and that's an opportunity as we talk about what are those things that we're acting upon, that you will see that your administrative team has already taken on. Your target group outcomes. Your target group is your bottom 25% of your kids as it relates to achievement. So basically they're saying, hey, we have this group that's performed at the bottom 25th quartile. We are going to make a mini report card for those 25% of all of your students. We look at their achievement. We know that these kids are already struggling. This gives us an indicator of when we take a step back and ask what are their struggles as it relates to achievement. We can dive into that after the fact. DPI will provide those target group outcomes to our districts. But then we also want to look at our growth. And what's interesting about the growth with your target group is it's actually not that lagging as it relates to the rest of our population, which is a positive in one regard that we see that group growing. But what is our opportunity with that target group? We want to obviously catch them up to the rest of their peers. So yes, absolutely, any report card I've ever looked at, that growth metric for the target group is usually lagging behind what I call the universal. But there's always the opportunity to try to push them forward towards that universal outcome and that universal growth. Chronic absenteeism, we're just simply taking that 78.2, we subtract it from 100, and that lets you know that for that target group, you've got about a 22.8% of your students in that bottom 25th percentile are missing 18 days or more of school. So when we talk about chronic absenteeism, we're talking about them missing 10% of their school days. Now again, that can be excused, that can be unexcused. Usually when we're talking about that target group, it's probably more unexcused situations than it would be excused. But obviously there could be students that fall into that category that just get to go on a really nice vacation. Finally, graduation, you're going to see that target group being at 95.9, another celebration as you think about what do we want for all of our students. Obviously we want for them to be able to walk out of our doors with a diploma in our hands. So that's telling me that that target group still is getting the attention, is getting the service that they need in order to get that diploma. Again, opportunity for growth there. 100% is everyone's desired goal. We're moving the needle in it, even if we look at the universal and we talk about 96 coming up. You guys are doing a really nice job with that. You're on track to graduation, in my opinion. This is one of those areas I would look at for you guys, and this would be a spot where you can celebrate. Your chronic absenteeism across your district, 11.7%. I come from a district where it was like 18%. So to see that you guys are in a spot where we're closing in on that 10% marker, that would be much more what I would call probably that criteria to really celebrate as it relates to, are we getting our kids into our buildings, into our seats to work with our teachers, because we know that is where we're going to benefit those kids the most. Graduation being at 96, again versus the state at 92, fantastic. 3rd grade ELA and 8th grade math. These two factors are included in your report card because they're two of the primary indicators as we talk about on track to graduation. And so we want to see obviously that performance at 3rd grade ELA be as high as possible. 67.9, it far surpasses the state. And knowing that you guys are in the process of going through new literacy implementation, I would expect to continue to see this number to grow because you have a rigorous, you have a viable, and you have a guaranteed resource you're putting in your kids' hands and your teachers' hands. And then finally, that 8th grade mathematics score, 73.7, again, extremely surpasses your state average. That's a number that I would be really, really proud of, only because I haven't seen a number that high in a long time. So when I saw that, I was like, darn, I wish I could have got that when I was in MENA. So that is something that you guys should really be looking at and asking yourselves, what's going well in that 8th grade classroom, that 8th grade math environment, and that's something we want to bottle, and that's something that we want to continue to roll up as we go into our high school years and beyond.
Jim?
Yep.
Can I ask you, go back to the third grade English?
Yep.
And the 67.9, that means that, tell me what that means, does it mean that 67.9% of third grade students when they reach third grade are at their grade level, or does it mean something different?
That's as it relates to, we talked about advanced and meeting. So meeting the expectations by grade level as it's related to what the state has set as the cut scores.
So that means 32.1% are not yet at grade
Correct.
level when they leave third grade.
Correct, that would be they'd be approaching or developing.
So they could be close, but they're not quite there.
Correct. Correct. Any other questions on that? I know I'm maybe flying on you, I apologize. Okay, we can continue on. This is important, so as we talk about achievement, this is important this year because with the new cut scores I mentioned before, this is going to be, it's not an apples to apples comparison, so as you go through your packet, you'll see on achievement, this should come probably just after your big circle, the page with the big circles on it. But the reason this is important for you is because this is really setting a new baseline for you. And as a district, as we move into the future for our ELA kids, again, this is K-12, you know that you've got 54% of your students at that advanced or meeting designation proficiency levels. We would obviously now be able to use this with these new cut scores. We're going to be able to use this as our baseline to see where do we go from here. Now DPI did, again, one of the things that frustrates us as leaders is DPI came up with a very convoluted equation to try to create an apples to apples comparison between this year's cut scores and the previous year's cut scores. You have to be either a rocket scientist or have worked for NASA at some point in your life to understand that calculation. But ultimately, what I would say to you is, I would focus on this. I wouldn't go backwards.
Did CISA 6 at least send a letter complaining about it?
I would bet you that every person that works with DPI has had that conversation with them, and they are working on, their feedback will now create some type of a team that will come together and they'll do more work to make it more clear.
Seems to get more common.
I hear you, I hear you.
It's a resolution.
It is a.
Yes. So for you guys, again, moving forward, and you think about your administrators and the work they do with their improvement teams, you think about Scott and the work he's doing with you guys around the KPIs, this should be where we start from moving forward. We talked about ELA, we look at your math, and again, you can see your advanced being that light blue, you've got your meeting at that purplish, your yellow being your approaching, and your orange being developing. Again, is it where you want to be? No. But this is an opportunity for us to be able to take that step back, ask ourselves what's working well for those students at the advanced meeting, where are we struggling, what can we do within our Tier 1 curriculum, what can we do with Tier 2 supports and Tier 3, and again, those are things that your administrators have already thought about in our processing, which is amazing.
Scott, this is not in our packet, so
Yeah,
you can give that to us.
Yep, absolutely, sure. You just have the cover sheet, I believe, for that.
Next up. So this is in my opinion, this is one of my favorite visuals or piece of information that you take out of your report card. And the reason it's one of my most favorite pieces is because it's going to give me an indication of visually how are our kids growing. Now we talked about that when we take all of these different kids, they're getting put into their buckets. This line right here, this 3, for this value added model, you'd want to see your kids at that 3. Because that's telling you that they're growing at what the state expects for that group of kids in that given year. So obviously we've got work because we're below that 3 right now. But again, that's the opportunity now. That's not what we're going to focus on from a deficit lens. This is the opportunity to say, okay, why is it that these kids aren't growing at the rate that we would want to see them grow when compared to their peers? There's a lot of things and a lot of factors that can go into why we might not see that growth that's commensurate with the state. Is it a curriculum issue? Is it a standards issue? Is it something as we think about practices? Those are all questions that your team is going to wrestle with and that they're going to be able to process through. And again, we talk about the investment you made with your ELA curriculum in K-3. That's going to start to pay dividends over time. And we have to understand too that this piece is a 3-year average. So it's going to take time for us to see that growth to that 3 and beyond. So it's not a 1-year fix. I'm not going to have one great cohort of kids and then all of a sudden everything's fine. This is just going to take progress. It's going to take consistency, and it's going to take time for us to see us seeing that growth that would be commensurate with what we would expect from the state's perspective.
So that top line is all students.
Correct.
And yet, when we were on the 8th grade slide before, we were saying about how fantastic we're doing. So, is there a breakdown somewhere within all the data that shows what area is pulling us away from line 3?
Well, and the other thing we have to be careful of too is growth and achievement don't go hand in hand all the time. Because you're going to have some of your highest achievers that don't do a lot of growing. You're going to have, like we just heard reference, like we have 8th grade students reading at a 10th and 11th grade level. It's really hard for that 8th grader to grow, which is a good problem. So really where the bang for your buck comes in when you talk about growth is looking at that bottom 25th percentile group and saying, where can we get those kids to grow more than a year's worth of growth in a year's time? Because those are the ones where we can start to make that true impact. It's not going to be at the higher end. So again, within pockets, you can certainly get a breakdown by grade level of where are we from math, where are we from reading ELA as a late student achievement. That's not something that the report card does for us. That's something that is taking place behind the scenes.
I would think that our higher learners that are in like the 8th grade or 10th grade, they were the ones that were pushing the bar though in 2nd grade and 4th grade when they were being identified and they were growing more rapidly back then. So it sounds like it might kind of balance out. They're slowing down at the higher grade, but the ones that are in the lower grade are making up for that.
Could be. Something I've always done in my own world was track cohorts. It's important to be able to look at that cohort over time. And to your point, you usually see a cohort have really explosive growth, and then they do level off. And that's just the nature of it. If somebody can solve the middle school mystery of, I always wondered why kids stopped loving to read once they hit middle school. It's kind of like, why does some of that growth slow down? It's the middle school animal. And then the high school folks have to try to figure things out from there as well. So a lot of factors go into that though.
I have a question on the growth part you were just saying. So if someone got a 29 on their pre-ACT last year, and someone got a 29 on the pre-ACT again this year, did she rack the growth?
It's an interesting way to state it. That's not helping growth, right? If they got the
Right,
same.
so you were saying like you're already up here, but you're not growing, but then that's a ding on the report card, correct? But you're already high.
That's not helping us with growth.
They don't measure it, they don't measure where it is on the old scale versus the new scale, because the ACT score, they also lowered the acceptable number for that. So that's, her example, you know, is, I scored a 29 last year and I scored a 29 this year.
But like she's really happy with that. But
She's-
like
Right,
it
but I
sucks
mean,
on
do
the
they
record.
view that as growth, because now we've got a person that exceeded the average grader this year, even though they got the same score last year?
right, but it's a
See
ding.
what I'm saying? Do they, for lack of a better term, are they playing that game?
And again, I think the important piece for us is this helps to inform what the work is. It can't become it's the most public facing example of data that goes out for us, absolutely. But if we let this become the work, I know that I speak for my own, my own kids as they sit in a building, I wouldn't want that. And we'll talk about some of the stuff again that's being done as a response to what these people are seeing and how they're handling it, which I think is exactly what needs to happen.
Tim, we all got a communication from Mr. Yerke, our high school principal, that showed from 2017-18 on the two main subjects, math and English, tremendous growth in there as far as kids achieving greater knowledge. But yet the overall score of the high school was much lower in the year where we achieved more than it was in the year where we achieved far less. Okay, so with that said, and with the state constantly changing things, why should we even pay any attention at all to these scores? Why shouldn't we just look at the various subjects and how our kids are doing?
I wish I was qualified to answer that question, just from the stance of, I don't want to, I'm not going to speak for BPI. Like I said, when I open it, this is one of the data points that you can use as a team as you think about continuous improvement. And it's one opportunity to it gives us an opportunity, a chance to put a microscope on some things, and it does give us some really good feedback. My really good feedback right now would be this growth piece for this team of where are we seeing opportunities across the board to examine what are we teaching in our classrooms? Is it at the rigor that we would expect to see? Does it align with our standards that our state has given us? That's a really, really good process that anybody could engage in, and I think it's going to lead to some answers of, I know Mr. Yerke's already engaged with that work in English, and I think it's going to reveal, here's some really good opportunities to give our kids a better experience.
That'd be great if that was what it was only used for.
Yeah.
But it isn't. It's released to the general public as gospel. And every realtor under the sun is running around, hey, you wanna be in this district because look at their state testimony. That's not how it's used. The media doesn't treat it that way. And you can take a lot of districts and you can look at them, and with the new formulation, basically, you just flip the charts. And the buildings and the schools that were doing great last year all of a sudden aren't. It was almost like a direct effort by DPI to make a lot of schools look good at the expense of others.
I don't know what, I appreciate what you said as it relates, again, it is a public facing piece. I would challenge the board, I would challenge this district to think about what can I control. I can control getting my kids into school.
Yeah.
I can control making sure they have a qualified adult in front of them and that they're getting a great learning experience. Those are the pieces at the end of the day that are going to impact those kids far more than anything. So
Please share these two that the board could get those.
They're right here.
I just passed it up, it's in the packet. So I
Yeah.
wanted him to be able to talk to it, and then I can look at it rather than look
So
at
you
it.
could have a really good score, but your school was just teaching to the test, and maybe you don't have like a really great tech ed program or a work release, but like, I just thought, I was hoping Brian would actually review his email to us because, I don't know if you have time to do that, but like, it was just so good because there's so many things that like, we are getting kids college and career ready. Maybe
You
they're
gotta
not.
remember though that some kids just suck at taking tests.
Well, I have.
I mean, I was one. Like,
Yeah.
you could be great at homework or academically in school, but you put a test in front of you and it's like you go numb.
let's bump on Scott to the next one, just because that's exactly the point, and that's the reason I included this. So this is just every district, this does not impact any scores, but this is just a way for us to be able to document and see how are we doing as it relates to the offerings and the experiences that we're providing to our kids. In your case, you guys are above the state average as it relates to how many of your kids are taking AP classes. It's a great thing, it's a great celebration. And when we talk about, and I really do appreciate, John, when you had mentioned, like, what's the narratives that are out there? How do we control the narrative of that great piece of, our kids are getting really rigorous experiences that maybe others aren't. 49.8% of your kids are taking a dual credit experience. They're walking out of the door with college credit. That's a big deal. I mean, that far surpasses, almost doubles what the state average is. Your industry recognized credentials, so your kids walking out of your buildings with documentation in their hand that's letting them go into, and I apologize, I don't know your scope and sequence, but I'm guessing either nursing and or other fields that they can actually step into a career right out of your high school doors. That's amazing. 12.5%, that's a big number. I come from a district of 6,000 kids where that number was about 10 to 15 kids, not 86. So that's a huge deal for you guys. Work-based learning, I bet there's always kind of some interest as it relates to what qualifies as work-based learning, but biggest thing I take away from that is you're giving kids alternative experiences to just what's in the classroom. Again, great stuff. And then the participation by types of art courses, I included that as well. Just because, again, it gives us a lens into what are the things our kids are interested in. You know, you can put as much weight into those outcomes as you want, but it's a good way to see what types of courses are our kids taking when it's all said and done. And again, not measured, but it's there as information for kids. And if I'm trying to sell our district, I'm trying to go out to the realtors, I'm trumpeting, come to this district for great AP opportunities, come to this district for great dual enrollment, dual credit opportunities, come to this district to be able to get those industry recognized credentials, because it's going to set you up for life after high school, which is what you guys focused on in your mission statement.
That's not what realtors use.
I hear you. I hear you.
And they're not gonna hear that message.
And
We
it's
control
Scott,
what
let's,
we can control.
Right.
we'll finish up with just the action steps here. So what I just had asked your building leaders to provide is just, they had an opportunity to work with Eric Larson, who is a wizard of all wizards when it comes to interpreting the report card. He's one of my partners at CC6. He's had a chance to work with each of your building leaders around, where are you, what can this tell you, and how can this inform those action steps. So these were just a couple. I couldn't get everything on the screen without making it super small font. So I wanted to make sure that you were just able to see some of those actions that they've already committed to in order to take that next step because of what they saw out of the report card. So them being, it's okay. So them being responsive to what's in front of their face, what are they doing? They're having an intentional focus on attendance, creating family awareness related to what chronic absenteeism is. They're focusing on 4th grade math growth. They're talking about staff collaboration in order to make sure that their Tier 1 instruction is rock solid. They're working through Act 20, which again, as you know, one of those curveballs that we get thrown as a school district that we have to manage, and you guys are doing that. You're doing a really nice job. Leveraging PLCs in collaboration to make sure that there's awareness around what do kids need and how do we make sure they get it. Utilizing small group instruction, which is one of the most impactful approaches that you can take to supporting a kid who might be behind. Focusing on practices that will support student engagement. So what are those things in your classrooms that we can continue to do? Partnering with CISA, one of my consultants has been, actually two of my consultants have been coming in to work on what type of feedback do we get to teachers so they can grow and they can be at their best. Working with your English, is it the whole English team, Brian?
9 and 11.
9 and 11 to say, let's just take a look at the work that we're doing and how can we maybe make some changes to make this more impactful. We talked about that. Supporting bilingual learners, which that is every district throughout the Fox Valley. We have to get better at that. And then finally, that targeted intervention for struggling learners. So my takeaway as I stand here today is no one's ever satisfied with where you're at. You shouldn't be, right? We wouldn't be here because we wouldn't care. Now what do we do, though, as a result of the feedback that we've gotten? The work begins, and that's what your team is doing. They are committed to that, and I can see that as an outsider. I hope you guys see that. I certainly know that Scott sees that, and I know that you'll have opportunities as a board to come back to those KPIs, which really, at the end of the day, like you've mentioned, the report card's one small piece of the KPIs. So as we kind of take that step back and interpret what are all those other pieces of the puzzle that make up why this place is great, that's what you gotta have those discussions around. And that's where you gotta start to do some of that work as a district as well, is how do we continue to push those KPIs forward in addition to what we see.
So Scott, well, sorry, go ahead. Scott, on the chronic absenteeism, what are our steps as a district to hold the parents accountable for their kids not coming? Like, are we following through with
Sure, so
what needs to be done?
we are, we're from the building principal and the communication, the phone calls, the letter to citing for truancy and habitual truancy, and then in some cases, parents are cited if they're contributing to the action or the not being there. Those are just a few steps that we're looking at. Educating why you need to be here. You know, creating an environment that students, if I'm in school, I'm frustrated and upset that I wasn't there for something. Sometimes students don't have the option to choose whether they're at school. You know, if it's not a priority for the parent and maybe their experiences weren't as positive growing up, and that's, you know, demonstrated through, so just breaking that cycle of school's important, you need to be here, all hands on deck, let's get the kids here, you know. So that's just a few approaches that we're taking to that.
So I missed that. What, did we do better this year? I didn't see the apples to apples comparison on that. I thought we had done better.
You didn't want to do that.
I personally, I looked back at your previous report cards, but for the purposes of me this evening, I wanted to focus on what's in front of your face now. Because that information is what your team is using to be able to move forward, and I wanted to make sure that you guys just have that general understanding, even what did they put together.
Well, to Katie's question, maybe Scott knows the answer. Have we-
Like, I know that was a focus a year ago.
You're-
Yeah, for chronic absenteeism for it was in our KPIs, for the lower, it's 25% of our students within, looking at a very specific group that were chronically absent, and then improving or lowering that percentage of chronically absent. This is a district-wide group. We were looking at very narrow groups that we know have been chronically absent.
So did this go up or down?
From last school
I'm
year.
just curious year to year.
From
That was your
22, 23, to 23, 24.
Because that wasn't.
I would have to look, I think it went down slightly, so I would have to look.
The thing you have to remember with attendance too is it's what's called a lagging indicator, so the chronic absenteeism you see on this 23-24 report card is from the 21-22 school year.
Oh.
So you'll see your efforts that you put
We won't even see
into
it for 2
last
years.
school
So there
year.
you go.
You're gonna
Oh,
see it
that's
next
what I was
year.
asking. I couldn't figure out
Oh, I
what
see.
we were comparing.
Yeah, you should, well, I'll shut up, it's more work, but you can't pull that out of Wise, like you can see your current year's absentee rate or attendance rate, but that's not represented in the report card, so it's always
So that's
1 year
not
behind.
last year's, that's.
2 years ago.
What
21,
good
22.
does that do?
So we've done like an assessment stuff that says most of our absenteeism comes in these grades or this time of the year, during hunting season, during Christmas, during,
Yes.
you know, have we
We
looked at this,
monitor
figured this out?
absenteeism very often. That's often when we meet as an A team. That's one topic that we're talking about in that. What are we doing to strategize to increase that?
And again, I think what you guys should hear is when you compare other absentee rates that I've seen have been so much worse. So what you are doing to be in that 10% ballpark, when you compare it to others, it's good stuff. Now what's next, right? It's
Because we know if kids aren't here, they don't have a chance to
Right.
grow
Those
or to
numbers-
find a key.
Those numbers that you say that we're doing well, for some reason don't flow through to our final score.
What's the
You mentioned a few things that we were doing much better than the previous district, but
it's
they
always,
typically have a better overall score than us.
yeah, it's growth is the area where you have the greatest opportunity for that report card to grow, and it's gonna, but that's, again, like I said, it's gonna take time, and it's gonna take trust in what are the systems that you're starting to implement, because it's not gonna happen overnight. You know, that's the reality of any type of a shift we make with a curriculum especially. You've made that major shift with your English curriculum at the K-3 level, which everybody has had to. And that, it's gonna take time for the state to be able to recognize that that was the right shift on their behalf.
Yeah, so when this report card first came out, they didn't have that.
Right.
I don't remember a new law passing that said, put that in there. Some people did that on their own discretion. This goes to the thing, what can we control and what can't we control? But maybe as a district, we can't control that, but maybe we should be talking to our legislators to say, simplify this process so that we understand year over year if we're improving or not.
Yep.
And we understand district to district whether more kids are failing here or are failing in Neenah or wherever, the simplification process would be greatly appreciated. Are there districts that ignore the score and set up their own metrics and promote that to the community rather than the score? I mean, you talk to a lot more districts than we do because of your job.
Yep.
Are there districts that?
See, you guys are a carbon copy of what I would see with a variety of other districts. Set up, you have your key performance indicators. Those are pieces that help you write your story. That's the information and the feedback and the data that you can use to come back if there is as we think about, this becoming a business where we have to sell ourselves a little bit, those key performance indicators are going to be where you guys can do that. Because there's a lot of good stuff there.
So
sure.
maybe we should throw that overall score out of our key performance indicators.
Well, that's what I think.
I don't know, but I'm not gonna say yes or no, or.
I'm just thinking out loud.
Because this last year we made it as, the district report card as a standalone key
Right,
performance indicator, because that's what we're working for, the best results within that.
right.
So my key takeaway from what you presented here tonight was your statement where you said this is one data point.
Yep.
And to me, that's spot on.
Yeah.
That is just spot on. It is one data point. To your comments about the realtors, I agree with Mandy. We can only control what we can control. We can get our own realtors to come in and sit down and talk to them about that. And we talked about that in the connections committee, but we can't control the media. Nobody can control the media, but this is, the information is data that our team is working with. That's the important thing. That's the key thing. And again, the improvement, the advancement is what we wanna see.
Do you know why it was pulled out with your consultant to engage in a purposeful review of our English and language arts curriculum at the secondary level? Like, what triggered that as a action point?
Yeah, we did that. So just working with our English team, looking at our English scores, the growth scores, and transition within the department. We figured it was time to explore scope and sequence of our standards from the middle school to the high school to make sure we were meeting. In talks with Eric Larson, we asked him, what do we do? Because we're kind of at a loss with this report card, so where do we go? And he really said, he goes, other than looking at attendance, I would do a standards review in math and English to see if you're hitting all those standards. He goes, and then keep doing what you're doing. Because, we were ready to throw the baby and the bathwater out. And I shared the email, I don't think it's a level playing field for the score necessarily.
Yeah.
So we're just kicking over every rock, and I thought Tim did a good job of explaining the process and that it's one snapshot and highlighting the good and the bad in there. So we just, I know you're not supposed to have a heartbeat with it, but Kirk and I went through the 9 stages of grieving because we have good schools. And it's not fair to our kids when you say, we meet few expectations when you have a ton of good things going.
Well, it's not fair to all you guys that are putting in all that work and keep doing what you're doing.
Well,
because-
and his email said like, okay, our ACT score was up in high school, the
Yeah.
reading, the math, like, okay, we're trying to get good readers and kids
Well,
that can do math.
Yeah, and there's a ton of stuff we can work on. There is, but when you look at some of the data points, you know, in 2017-18, we were a high school that significantly exceeded expectations. Our report card has gone down 20 points in 6 years, and our school is in a much, much better place.
Mhm.
We have more opportunities for kids, our ACT scores are up, our pre-ACT scores are up. All those things are up, but yet we're down 20 points in our school report
Right.
card.
Mhm.
And we're, like I said, exploring every option to figure out what has happened in that time. And I don't really have a good answer,
Brian,
but there is work to do.
I really
Brian,
appreciate
do
you.
you, worry that if we chase the score, all those good things that you pointed out, we may, because we can't do too much multitasking.
I don't think we should
And
be chasing
if
the
we,
score.
if we chase and do things to try to make that score go up, could we be taking our eye off the ball for the things like graduation rates, career readiness, increasing the number of students that are at grade level or above for English and math, which are the most important two of those subjects. But
Yeah, we would never do that. We have good people in this building and good administrators and good leaders. I think we'll always explore every option to get better for the best interest of our kids, and I don't think we would ever chase a test. But I think that's some of the thing that annoys all of us from an admin perspective, and it's the game of school. You know, it's how often do you want to play those things and spend time and energy for the school report card? Or do you do what's best for kids? We've always done what's best for kids in this district, but it's frustrating for all of us to go, well, if I exempt this kid or get this kid not to take this test or beg this kid to come into school. My kid was a low growth counter in both categories. She's a great, bright young lady, but she counted as a negative on both scores.
Well,
You know,
that's
it's,
what I was saying, yeah.
so
Yeah.
but it's frustrating. You know, you have to explain to parents why you're a meets few expectations, but yet go to your staff and your kids and tell them you're a great school. So it's frustrating. You know, and I think all of us in the room are not happy with our scores and want to continue to improve. And like I said, I thought Tim did a good job of explaining it. But there's things we'll always kick around to make sure we're getting better.
well, I don't know if you saw the resolution we passed to try
Yeah.
to make it more objective rather than all these subjective factors that are added by the DPI.
Well, I think that's
If that actually, became law in the state, would that even the playing field out more?
Yeah, I think that's one of the frustrating pieces is you have different rules for different schools based on the calculation. So there are schools, like I shared in the email, who are at a district level less than 15% of their kids proficient or advanced who are significantly exceeds expectations. There are high schools who have a chronic absenteeism rate of 48% and an achievement rate of less than 25% who are exceeds expectations but meets few. It's a tough pill to swallow. So I know what the state was trying to do. It's a noble cause of leveling things out, but I don't think it's fair when you take a school like Lincoln and a school like Sugar Bush and try to compare them because the calculation is different. It's different rules.
Yep, okay, agreed.
Yeah, the word that keeps coming to my mind is this process rigged?
I'm not gonna go there. Like I said,
Bring it on track.
The takeaway that I think will kind of bring us together is
Yeah.
continuous
Some of
improvement.
what I'm gonna present down at the convention.
Yep.
Just that I get it in the proper words, because the way you'll say it and the way I think it are probably two different things.
Yeah.
Like,
no comment.
What I was just saying there, continuous improvement is our mode of operation, through our key performance indicators and how we're continually moving forward, whether it's through curriculum review or standards review, or continually hiring the best people to put in front of students, which is the ultimate responsibility that we have in the district, to put qualified individuals with great skill sets that are passionate about whatever their curriculum is and teach it with integrity to our students. So I appreciate the candid feedback tonight. As Tim had shared, we're actively processing through, and we'll continually do our very best for best results with the rules as established. Right?
I do have one question. Yeah. This, out of economic, we received that 40%. what number did you say?
Yeah.
35. And does that change the metrics like every year? If that number isn't hit, or what?
It will, the higher your economically disadvantaged number goes, the more that your growth impacts your score.
Okay.
And then, like I said, you guys have been pretty static around 38, between 38 and 40 ballpark.
But that doesn't help our goals, is what you're saying, because they rated on that.
Tim, is it true that regardless of what we do, based on state proficiency levels being changed, that everybody will go down again next year?
Well, they won't use the equation next year. So that's yet to be seen, because they are convening a group an advisory group to help establish how that will be determined.
It's
So I
like-
would say that's more to come.
Because like you said, we're meets few this year, based on Eric's conversation. Everybody will go down regardless of what you do based on proficiency levels changing. So if we're meets few or worse, then it's a 5-year window to improve because it's all 3-year averages. So we would be stuck at this.
It's like the 3-year rolling average.
Yeah, so the high school, for example, would be stuck at meets few or meets none for at least 5 to 6, 7
Because it
years.
isn't based on year to year?
It's 3-year average.
3-year average, rolling
What
average.
good does
So in
that do?
3 years, you're gonna be driving truck, you're done.
It just clouds
I'm just
the
kidding.
issue.
I mean, how can you keep
Okay,
going? Like, it's so depressing.
We probably should,
Well, you look good somehow.
call it back in and agenda.
Thank you, Ken, much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you. The next item is review of potential approval of Wisconsin Association of School Boards. We had hoped to have all the resolutions input in there so that we could review them and give John a little input into where to do, but we won't have those. WSB will not issue those till early December, and we'll have them for the next meeting. But we did have some feedback. The resolution that we had about the school report card did pass the resolutions committee, will be put onto the floor. So that's one bit of good news. The resolution that we passed to have no biological males on girls' teams in Wisconsin, to ask the legislature to make that Wisconsin law, as has been done in 26 other states, that did not pass. It went through 2 different stages of discussion and 2 different meetings of the resolutions committee. And the second meeting was fiercely debated. The representatives that were in the, who were on the committee but were also members of the WIAA board argued vociferously against it. Just on the thing that that should only be decided by the WIAA, not by the WASB or not by the state government. And it ultimately, according to Executive Director Dan Rossmiller, our criteria, our resolution met all the criteria for getting through the resolutions committee. Their job is not to rule on whether it's a good resolution or not. They're just supposed to rule if it meets the criteria for being well-written, being timely, and being something that affects legislation. Check, 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 all 3 of them. But we were voted down 14 to 15. So, I've got a thing, our bylaw provision is a little different discussion, but my first question to the board is, this can, as last year, our resolution was turned down by the resolutions committee, but we were able to bring it to the floor of the convention as a floor item. And it received 21% of the votes there as a floor item. And my question to you is, should we present it as a floor item? And if we do, it requires a motion of this board. to make that happen. I'll add this, I've had at least 10 other presidents of school boards call me and thank me, ask me to thank you, rather, for putting this resolution in, and have asked that, as I said, they hope that we would put it on the floor so they have a chance to discuss it and debate it at the convention. So, that's my question. Should we move forward as we did last year?
We didn't get time to do it, but we got time.
No, we
present. Oh, we did. I thought they.
If we decide to do it, I need a motion and a second.
I make the motion.
John has moved, Holly is second, that we present it as a floor item. There's no guarantee it will get there because the floor resolutions are the very last ones. If time expires or a quorum expires, then they're just lopped up. But last year, we
I
made,
was surprised that it actually got to a floor vote last year.
What did you say the percent?
and I do think the staff of WSB actually would not want to be seen as trying to push this out of the way. I think they understand that this is something that should have got through the resolution. So,
Hard saying.
any discussion on it?
You're a little more optimistic than I am
Yeah, we'll see.
on
I'm
the
just,
governance model.
yeah, just talking about my conversation with Dan Rossmiller, the executive director, when he called me with this information. So I guess we'll proceed to vote. You want to vote this by
Roll call.
acclamation? Okay,
Is
we'll
this,
have a-
are we separating out the two because,
No, the first one is
oh,
through.
okay,
Yeah.
then, okay, Jill didn't have a specification.
Yeah.
Report card one is already on the resolutions.
Okay, so.
What on now is the
Okay.
recommendation of the wild mails in.
Okay, so we have John first, Molly second.
Just call me Molly.
She did.
Holly, sorry.
Holly.
I'm running out of coffee by this time.
Holly.
It's-
Okay,
Okay, then you want a roll call vote?
roll call vote.
Okay, I'm just gonna go around the table because I didn't really call this. Okay, Chris Martinson,
Yes?
Mark Grossman,
Yes.
Yes.
Mandy. Nate,
Yes.
Holly,
Yes.
John. Katie, I'm a yes.
Okay, motion carries. The other item in here is our proposal for an amendment to the bylaws of the WASB that would change that the only voting members, the only voting people at the delegate convention once a year in January would be the delegates from actual school boards and the member delegates from CSIS and the board of directors of WSB would not be an automatic vote. In other words, they could be a vote if they were selected by their school board, but they're not an automatic additional vote. And I presented what I thought was a very clear amendment. The attorneys at the WSB said it doesn't do the trick, and it didn't, the one I wrote does not pass muster, and they told me it can't be just in the one article that I amended, but there showed me two other articles. I made changes in those and resubmitted them, and it still doesn't pass muster. So I asked if the WSB would write it the way it would, accomplish what we want to accomplish. They said they're not gonna do that.
I'm shocked. Just shocked.
But they suggested that if we had our attorney look at what we wanna do and, do it, and if he could rewrite it and, submit it, then, you know, it could go forward. And if, as long as the attorneys agree.
So you saying everyone just gets one vote is not concise enough?
Not concise.
The way I wrote it was not considered concise. And I think it was very clear, it was very clear to me, I've read a lot of bylaws, but,
We'll put it on our English teachers over here.
the question is,
I just don't
If,
understand how
you
else
know,
to write it.
if we had an attorney that was on a retainer and didn't cost any more money to do this, I would have already sent it to him, but I don't wanna spend attorney money without your okay. I'm glad to I'm glad to submit it to Jim. I feel like, his stamp of approval, odd language, you know, he would have a conversation with those attorneys and they would say, find out what their objections were. They weren't gonna tell it to me, so. So my question to you all is, should we, engage, Attorney Jim Macy to, solve this for us? Or the other alternative is drop it for this year, so it's up to you.
I would say drop
I
it.
would drop it.
Yeah, just spend,
I
Yeah,
don't want to
just spend the money, yeah, I mean.
for no guarantee that it's gonna be yeah.
And then
Well-
and if we do get it all right and we submit it, there's nothing saying they're gonna accept it then,
Right.
or that they're not gonna work diligently to defeat it.
The other thing is I mean, I've served as a representative on, through a couple of these things. Most of the votes that are accepted are passed by a wide margin. And we're talking about really a very few number of votes here that wouldn't have tipped most of those decisions that I was a part of, that when I was on the committee. If we were talking about 100 votes,
Right.
or we were talking about 50 votes, maybe, but we're
Something
talking
that's
about maybe 20.
Yeah.
That's
It's just-
it. You
it's
know,
the
it's,
concept.
I know it's
To
a
me,
principle
It
thing.
just goes to the view and the.
Yeah, and I agree with the whole principle of it, but it's not something that is swaying decisions. And for us to spend some money on that, no, no,
Agreed.
That was never the intent,
right, yeah,
but
On principle, yes.
principle, right, yeah.
on principle, it makes them look pretty bad,
No, so,
but nothing new there.
All right, so, I'm hearing a consensus that we not proceed forward on the,
I don't know unless we find an attorney that will do it for free.
all right. I think we're ready then, to move the agenda to letter D. The district, the annual district administrator evaluation process and timeline. As you know, this is probably about the fourth year that this board has done, evaluations using the WASB evaluation tool. We modified it slightly, for the last two times, we made modifications on it. And, as modified, it's in your packets. And, so what we first, there's two decisions we need to make is, should we continue with the same tool? And the second decision would be the timeline for, moving forward with the evaluation. So let's deal with one at a time. Any issues anybody has with the tool itself? How it was applied last year, et cetera?
I think we should continue with it, so there's some consistency on our evaluation.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yep.
Scott, is there anything you'd like to see different in it?
you know, over the past few years, it's worked well, you know, the feedback that I'm getting from you, and this also, a similar version goes out to our admin team, they give feedback as well on their perspective as well, working with them and what I do overall for the district, so I'm content with the process and where it's at. It's the opportunity to share feedback and gather feedback, that's the most critical element.
The tool that we use for, feedback from the people that report to Scott is also in your package. Okay, so I'm hearing the consensus, I don't think we need a motion on that unless there's any objection to it, to continue to use the same tool, now. And, so the second thing is the timeline, and I'm gonna throw out a suggestion on that. The big challenge is if you do it too quick, there's not enough time in the, the last one is delivered on our second meeting in January. Okay, so, we're not really letting a full year lapse, but in order to be ready for late January this year, we can't lag too much on the time. So,
I mean, I think if we are a little bit early, we're gonna be fine.
yeah. So my suggestion is,
Yeah.
is this, based on how we did it last year, I would suggest we, send it out to you on December 4th and make it, the deadline to return it by December 17th. December 4th to December 17th.
That's fine.
So you asked us if we were okay with the format, should we ask the other people who have to take it, like our, cause you just said Scott's
I'm sorry.
people that report to him also take this?
No, they also.
They're taking the survey,
They-
they're
Yeah, but
evaluating
you
it as
asked
well.
us, is there anything else you'd like to see, and I'm saying, should we ask them, is there anything you would like to see? I mean, I realize we don't have everybody here, but it probably would be a valid question.
Yeah, it's a smaller, subset of questions. If the board would like me to do that, I'd be glad to pose that question to our admin team to see if.
Yeah, maybe they can send it to
I would
us.
ask them,
Like, is there anything missing
Yeah,
that you'd
just-
like to see in this eval
That would
process?
definitely grind the process to a halt, because then we're gonna have to have another meeting to review and then discuss and go through. There's no
I
way we're
only
gonna.
asked because he asked if we were okay with the format.
Yeah,
Like,
I
oh,
think
well, there's a whole
the
other
fact
subset.
that we're okay with the format and we're the ones that are really doing the evaluation. I'm not saying they're not important, but I'm just saying, we're the ones that are ultimately doing the evaluation. Now, what we could do is, we could ask for those suggestions for next year, and ask right away, and just,
or we
as you're
could just
filling,
have it
as
as a suggestion
as you're
box, is there
filling this out,
anything you would like to
you're, any
see different?
changes for the following
Yeah.
year.
Or put it right in the comments.
Yeah,
Yeah,
When you respond.
I think we're
Yeah.
a little bit late to do that now.
I only was, because I'm like, well, there's two facets of people taking
We're
it.
only talking about 8 or 9 people.
Right.
In that second.
So
batch,
when you look at page 44 there, what's going, this is the narrative part where questions about to be described out, what's going well with the district, open narrative, next one on page 45. What, if anything, needs to be changed, okay, in that area there, admin, all right, breakfast on your table every morning when you come in, whatever, okay, whatever it is, sure.
Well, yeah, like 41 has what are your.
Yeah, and what are your wonderings, okay? Feel free to put in there, your wondering.
So, proceed as planned. That's what I'm hearing.
yep.
All right, then, we're ready to move the agenda then. Turn it over to, Scott to talk about the Board of Education student representative.
Thank you, Mr. Markinson. So, board members, this conversation started back towards the beginning of the year and our ability to represent, student representation at our board. Mr. Yerke and I were able to process through with the modified version this year, noting that it's not following the traditional election cycle, which goes on in April. I took this concept to the student representative or principal's council, and two individuals came forward of interest in being recognized as the board representative, and then in turn were then voted on by student council and the principal, student principal group as well. Servicing was Evan Retzloff, who will be recognized as our student board rep. Again, board members, what would take place is that we'd have Evan and our school board rep on our regular board meeting, so that once a month he would join us. And then as we work our way through the calendar year, when we get into that month of March, we would look to have another election, if you will, a representative to come forward and identify that through the voting process and similar processes which we enacted to identify Evan. So Mr. Yerke and I will work with Evan to have him ready and prepared. He will receive materials that are open to the public in essence. Not going to be making a voting decision or anything of that nature there, but he'll be able to share perspective, feedback, and within our agenda, I'll have an opportunity to place down where we go through our different reports, from my report to our director report. We'll have a student representative report as well, and he can share the highlights of what he would like to share with them. Sound fair?
Questions?
Okay.
Hearing none, I think we will then move to our final item in the open meeting, which is the, of this school.
Sure. So before we head out on the tour, as I welcomed everyone, this is our art music room. And when we walk from classroom to classroom, there are a few elements of this room that you'll see in all of the classrooms. The first thing I'd just like to point out, the windows. Okay, you'll see the upgraded window systems that replace that single pane window system which was original with the building. And then the quiet hum of our unit ventilator that is supporting the climate control within the space here. So those are the two elements that you'll see in all spaces. There'll be new casework that you'll see in some of our classrooms, primarily on the west side of the building, as well as some furniture configurations within flooring in the main hallways. Mr. Mark Britt, am I missing anything that you'd like to point out?
Some things they can't see, electrical updates, the breaker panels. If we ended up seeing, if you go to the basement, that's where all the boilers are. There's two boilers there there's pumps that are down there. Below this is a crawl space. All of the asbestos was removed from there as well. So those were all part of that project in 2020.
New asphalt outside as well, parking lots that when you walk down there.
The secured corridor was done even before that. If you haven't been here, the secured corridor was done with safety grant dollars in the middle there when you came in the secured corridor. If you would look to the right, that's where the school administrative assistant sits, where people come in during the day. So that was a remodel even prior to that. 2017, 18, somewhere in there.
Mrs. Grable, are there any other highlights that you'd like us to be looking for when we walk through the building in your perspective of the building principal?
All new ceiling grid. They used to have different tiles there when we upgraded the HVAC. We had a lot of those older tiles that sagging and things like that.
Do we have any future projects coming up, like ones on the docket?
For Readfield?
Yeah.
Not offhand.
The PTO is
Well,
starting the playground.
PTO is looking to support some improvements to the playground area.
Okay.
So they're ramping up just fundraising ideas to make some improvements to the playground. All right, so we're gonna head out past the office, all right, and then head down up and down the west hallway. And start there.
How are you? Good, how are you?
Thank you for having me, appreciate it.
Then stop it before closed session, so.
Okay.
Okay, it is now running.
Okay, we're ready then to go into closed session pursuant to section 19.85(1)(c) of Wisconsin statutes. The Board of Education will convene in closed session to discuss the continued employment, compensation, and support of staff members over which the board has jurisdiction and exercises responsibility, and also pursuant to the same statute, the Board of Education will convene in closed session to discuss the evaluation of an administrator over which the board has jurisdiction and exercises responsibility. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Moved by Mandy,
I'll second it.
seconded by Holly. We need a roll call vote for this.
This is to go into closed. Okay. Mark Grossman,
Yes.
Nate Grundy,
Yes.
John Heidemann,
Yeah.
Holly Schweitzer,
Yes.
Mandy Wills.
Yes.
Katie Madden, I'm a yes. Chris Martensen.
Yes. Okay, we are now in closed session as of 8:06 PM. And,
Okay, Chris, if you would recognize the open session item.
okay, we have just voted and we're back in, should be back in open session. We're called back into order. I am open to a meeting to receive, a motion to receive the resignation as presented of the paraeducator.
I'll make that
Karen
motion.
Redmond. Nate,
I'll second.
Mandy,
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carried. I'm now open to a motion to adjourn.
Go make that motion.
I'll second.
No, I said-
Well, I'll make that motion.
And